Bud Elliott released his blue chip ratio today for teams heading into the 2024 season. And OU ranks sixth in the country in blue chip ratio. And remember, the blue chip ratio is how many of your high school recruits are 4 and 5 star prospects. It does not take into account transfers. It's how many of your guys that you recruited out of high school that are on your roster, how many of those guys are 4 and 5 star prospects? And OU is at 73%. The only teams with a higher blue chip ratio, Ohio State at 90%, Bama at 88, Georgia at 80, A&M at 79, Oregon at 76. It may bring a lot of people a lot of joy to know that Texas is one spot behind Oklahoma with 72% blue chip ratio. And Ted, the only reason I really bring this up is to say Brent Venables and his staff are kicking ass on the recruiting trail.
They are. Did you see the breakdown of like maybe it was maybe like the last 5 years of what their ratio has done? I'm not sure. I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say it was like in the 40s, and it's just gone choop 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 choop. And here the last 3 years has really grown.
So I went back and looked, right? Lincoln Riley's last season, the 2021 season, heading into that year, OU's blue chip ratio was 66%. Now, I was led to believe that you could not recruit at an elite level in Norman. That's what a lot of us were led to believe, right? Turns out all Brent Venables has done is improve the recruiting. Now, have the results on the field been what you want it to be? No, I think we all can agree on that. But as far as accumulating talent and setting the foundation and getting the guys that have the type of measurables that can go out and win games in the SEC, there is just from any angle you look at it, the recruiting has gotten better under Brent Venables, period.
Mhm.
And there's only 16 teams in the country that are over the 50% threshold for the blue chip ratio. And OU's one of them, and 8 of them are in the SEC. So you gotta continue to bring in really physically gifted guys. And then of course there's the development component and then going out and executing on game days. But Ted, Brent Venables and this staff, they're doing a nice job, man. And the numbers reflect it.
Yeah, they do. Yet I'm continuously told over and over about what bad shape we're in, and I just keep like I don't know how much stock should be put in this. I mean, recruiting is not an exact science. Where you fall on this list doesn't necessarily mean that you can't beat the teams in front of you and you can't lose to the teams behind you. But I mean, it's just another kind of overall gauge that helps you kind of, try and quantify where teams are roster wise. And I think Oklahoma's roster is good and improving. And I think the most important factor is, we've had a good roster here before Venables came, but like the blue chip percentage, I think we all know that the heavy recruiting was being done on the offensive side. It was pretty weighted towards offense, and I I think the great thing about Venables and staff is the classes that he has signed are incredibly balanced, and that's what you got to have. You got to have a balanced football team. We've sprinkled in some elite players. Gosh, we've had a 5-star quarterback, 5-star offensive lineman. I know he's gone now, Caden Green, but 5-star defensive lineman, 5-star running back, number one running back in the country, 5-star safety. I mean, it's spread really nicely throughout. So, I think the results are going to follow.
One of the interesting things about the blue chip ratio, and I've talked to Bud Elliott about it. He's He's trying to figure out a way to factor in like big time transfers
Mhm.
eventually. He feels like he still needs more data, a couple more years of that type of stuff, and then maybe he can come up with a creative way to work it in. But I was looking at this and going, man, 73% blue chip ratio. That's really good. Oh, yeah. And their best players on offense and defense may be transfers. Because I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that Deion Burks could be the best player on OU's offense and Dominic Williams could be the best player on OU's defense. And that is no slide at Stutzman or Bowman. Like, I just think that if you put Dominic Williams into a Brent Venables attacking style defense, like I just think he's going to be a better player than he was at TCU. So
I agree.
I'm really excited about the blue chip ratio being at 73%, but I also know that OU's got they've got some impact transfers this season, which I mean, I don't know how you measure how important that is, but I know it's important as hell. It's especially Dominic Williams. That was a massive position of need.
Yeah, and I mean Des Malone, Dominic Williams, the offensive line players you
Bauer
mentioned, Deion
Sharp.
Burks, Bauer Sharp. I mean, those are all almost every transfer that we have starting is an improvement over what was there previously. And I mean, you could maybe even make the claim on some of that on the offensive line too. I don't know, but yeah,
Oh, wee
it's
woo. It,
wee woo. And what about center? It's got to be close.
everyone knows how much I love the way that McCade Matoyer played. But wee woo he's a more talented guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's got better measurables. And then, yeah, I think that I expect Hickman to be a more consistent player than Andrew Rain was. I just do. We're getting off track from the blue chip ratio.
We are.
We're just diving into the roster like we always do. But
It's us wanting to count those in our ratio is what we're what we're saying.
I just think they're going to be so you've recruited a lot of talented guys out of high school and you're adding impact transfers. I just think that is OU is starting to develop the formula that I think Brent Venables wants for this football team,
Mhm.
where your foundation is your high school guys. You're bringing in long, athletic guys that have the measurables you want. And then you're filling some of those gaps with big time transfer guys that are going to be impact players. Not not like the first season when he had to take a ton of transfers just to have bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that we're number 6 on this ratio. I think we're behind A&M. Um, how do you how do you value that with A&M? I don't know, but I think if you consider all of the players, we have a top 5 roster, I think. And I think that's a really good place to be. Top 5 roster is where you want to be. And yet again, uh, Bama, Georgia, A&M is in there, and then Oklahoma. And trailing behind us in a long train behind us is all the teams that are picked to beat us this year in the SEC. So, I mean, in my opinion, no excuses. And not that you got to take this as gospel, but I mean, I think it's reason enough to believe that we have a very competitive roster.
No doubt about it. One interesting thing, because I know that a lot of fans want to say, stars aren't everything, they don't matter. They are very important. And here's a little stat from Bud Elliott's Blue Chip Ratio article. 4 and 5 stars are about 10 times more likely to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft than 2 and 3 stars. And 5 stars are about 33 times more likely to be an All American as a 2-star. It's not that there's not great stories about 2-star and 3-star recruits and those guys becoming All Americans and becoming draft picks. Ted, you were one of those guys. I was one of those guys. But it really helps to just have guys that are really, really physically gifted.
Mm-hmm.
and have those guys in your program and develop those guys. I still think the key for OU is elite development and then just winning the X's and O's battles with Venables and Seth Luttrell and Joe John and now Zach Alley. But man, it was refreshing to see that OU is essentially right there when it comes to getting the talent out of high school.
How about Ohio State at 90?
It's pretty good. Pretty
Pretty
good.
good.
They got some really good transfers too.
Yeah, I think the transfer probably puts them around the 95% mark. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
High expectations there
That's
in
right.
Columbus.